How should we arrive at action?
By voluntary consent, voluntary cooperation of free men, unforced.
And how do our leaders arrive? How do we arrive at our leadership? Who elects? Who appoints?
The whole people elects. There is nothing wrong with the democratic process in politics. We arrive at it the way we arrived by the American Constitution as it used to be. By the constitutional process as we had it, people elect officials, but the powers of those officials, the powers of government are strictly limited. They will have no right to initiate force or compulsion against any citizen except a criminal. Those who have initiated force will be punished by force, and that is the only proper function of government. What we would not permit is the government to initiate force against people who have hurt no one, who have not forced anyone. We would not give the government or the majority or any minority the right to take the life or the property of others. That was the original American system.
Their deep conviction that speech is not free and therefore should not be free. That is essentially what the previous speaker said. She says there is no free speech, let's be real, and therefore there should be no free speech, and we should simply start restricting it endlessly. Since we are being cartooned as the monstrous side, let me begin with a monstrous image. In northern Uganda, for the last 15, 20 years, there has been a movement known as the Lord's Resistance Army. It practices its warfare in the name of God, and what it does when it dislikes the speech that is being made is that it cuts off the lips of the citizens who are speaking, and it puts padlocks through punctured holes in their lips and shuts them. I'm afraid that I'm very much unable to picture these people doing that, but it's very clear to me that that is what they wish to do.
Who's going to decide? We've already found that Oliver Wendell Holmes isn't competent on the point. Who will you appoint? Who will be the one who says, I know exactly where the limit should be, I know how far you can go, and I know when you've gone too far? And I'll decide that. Who do you think, who do you know? Who have you heard of? Who have you read about in history who you'd give that job? I would say, just for this evening, I wouldn't give it to anyone who's spoken so far on the other side. Now, actually, I do know a bit about Milton and quite a lot about Thomas Paine as well, and Mr. Paine actually updated and I think improved John Milton's Areopagitica, which is the classic case for free expression. And those of you who know Areopagitica and Paine's commentary on it will know that it recommends free speech in this way, not for you, but for the people you are listening to and the people whose comments you hope to hear in return, for your own education, for your own enlightenment, and for your own elucidation. As Mr. Paine says, commenting on Milton, one of the vices of those who would repress the opinions of others is they make themselves prisoners of their own opinions because they deny themselves the right and the means of changing them. Should this not be as plain as could be? The free interplay of ideas is not something that those of us who wish to speak or unload our opinions insist upon for that sake. It's because we want to hear what is said in response, however unwelcome it may be to us. Thus, the defense of any one opinion or form of expression is a defense of all of them.
Who are they to judge what is offensive? Surely you have different ideas, surely we all have different ideas, and yet somehow the concept of offense is being proposed by the other side as some sort of universal measure of civilization rather than the opposite. But one point of agreement that we have is that speech is fiercely powerful and can be intensely dangerous. I spent some time reporting from Rwanda in the aftermath of the genocide there. And one of the most striking things, the previous speaker referred to genocide, is that in the course of this genocide, a great deal of the genocide was incited by public speech, by radio speech, by incitement through words. And the words were used as hate speech, which you will find that the other side thinks should be censored because it is dangerous. The hate speech said, invariably, kill the minority, the Tutsis. They didn't always say it directly. They used euphemisms. The euphemisms would be phrases like, do your work, clear the bush, do not let a weed escape the blade. These were phrases that were well understood in the historical context, and they were clearly hate speech. There's no ambiguity about it. Those people have been tried and convicted for inciting mass murder in their country. The problem there was not free speech for haters. It was that this was the officially sanctioned speech by people who prohibited sanity from being free speech. Anybody who protested against the genocide was silenced as offensive. Offensive speech, my goodness, that Hutus and Tutsis should live side by side in comity. that they should allow each other to exist. How offensive. Let's silence them. Let's murder them. Let us have official speech. That was the position. And that is the position which, yes, ma'am, slippery slope. It's not a slippery slope, it's a greased precipice of which they wish to push you. Because once you start to say that racist speech or blasphemous speech is somehow or other offensive, you're immediately on the quick descent towards book burning. And the books that you wish to burn are the books that include, let's say, Huck Finn, where racist words are used in possibly the 19th century's most noble portrait of a black man in America, where blasphemous speech is used by Ahab. Most people who are burning books, of course, are too illiterate to notice.
These are not good days for liberty. If you look around the world, you see that the idea of freedom which contains the sense of carefreeness, seems everywhere in retreat, hounded by guns and bombs. Cartoonists lie dead in Paris. And just yesterday, there was an echo of that terrible event in what one Danish citizen referred to as their fairy tale country, a place where they were not expecting such things. But there's, I think, another danger for those of us who wish to defend liberty, and that we can find here in America as well, which is the danger from a new kind of timidness, if you like. Even here, the classical values enshrined in the First Amendment are under attack by the rise of this new timid culture, which on the one hand, more and more accepts the arguments of thin-skinned bigots that offense must be a limiting point on freedom. I'm going to return to this theme because it seems to me that here in America, the danger to free expression is beginning to be greatest where it should be most defended. That's to say, within the walls of the academy. And the people most willing to sacrifice or limit this fundamental right are young people. Human nature is the same everywhere, in all times, in all places, in all languages, under all political systems. And all discussions of liberty and its limitations must flow from that fact. What is it that human nature demands and must be allowed? Not all of human nature can be considered good, which is why most of the Ten Commandments tell us what we should not do. Not kill, not lie, so on. But the best of human nature is our innate understanding of and need for personal liberty. Nobody anywhere ever enjoyed being a slave. Everybody, everywhere, offered a chance of freedom, grasps it as a thirsty man seizes a drink. And any of us, looking into himself or herself, can and will see the same driving forces. We are language creatures, and we want to be able to express ourselves in speech. We are autonomous individuals, and we want to express our autonomy. There is, yes, a counterforce in us also, in which we sometimes believe the group to be more valuable than the self, and maybe these two ideas, these two instincts in human beings are in conflict, but the need of the self to be itself and say what it is, say who it is very, very great. This is who we are. Free men and women, born free, as Rousseau said, but everywhere in chains.
How does it avail the cause of civilization, sir, to fight brown shirts with brown shirt tactics? I would like to know that. And so I ask you then, what I share with this pious trinity of the opposing team is a deeply pessimistic view of human history. I do not believe that if you let people run around loose, they're going to have nice ideas about each other, and they're going to behave nicely to each other, because that's not what they do. Their response is to cut off their lips and clamp on a padlock, to decide who should be in the Sanhedrin of the mind, who should be in the Sanhedrin of the soul, and sit around and tell you what you're allowed to say and what you're allowed to think. They do not understand that there is not agreement about this. They seem to assume that somehow or other it will always prevail. Yes, they say times change. Sometimes it's allowed to be racist. Sometimes it's allowed to be anti-racist. Sometimes we silence the people who are pro-Jewish. Sometimes we silence the people who are anti-Muslim. But that's okay because, we're just rolling with the times, right? And we're always going to let the people who we sort of think are civilized speak in the name of civility. I think that this is extremely dangerous.
The First Amendment doesn't just provide me with a living. The First Amendment is my life. When it's infringed, I am offended. I have claimed the right to be offended. Do not claim the right to go and burn down someone else's place of worship, to threaten their editor with violent reprisal, to picket their home, to publish their name in threatening terms on the internet. I won't do any of that. It doesn't mean I can't be offended, but it does mean that I'm even more offended by those who claim the right not just to be offended, but to seek violent reprisal.
While they conclude that we must accept that because speech is limited, we must put ourselves in charge of limiting it, that we're dealing really here with a case of lesser evils. The question before us tonight, simply put, and simply stated in the proposition that we were given, is that freedom of speech must include a license to offend. I would expand that license to blaspheme, and I would not call it a license. They speak of it as a license. They think all speech is a license. That all speech should be licensed because most speech should be restricted before it is licensed. And then we decide, okay, we'll let this out, we'll let that out, we'll let this out, we'll let that out. I think that that's a very, very, very dangerous precipice on which they want to perch us. I do not trust them, even though I think that they're probably more trustable than most. But what is to say that they will stay in charge of that speech? What is to say that we will not fall into the hands of somebody we don't trust? What is to say that the message, which one day seems somewhat sane, the next day becomes to kill, and that the people who say, let us not kill, are silenced in the name of reasonable speech, in the name of civilization, to moderate that?
The French satirical tradition has always been very pointed and very harsh. And it still is, you know. And I mean, the thing that I really resent is the way in which these our dead comrades, you know, these people who died using the same implement that I use, which is a pen or a pencil, have been almost immediately vilified and called racists and I don't know what else. Charlie Hebdo attacked everything. It attacked Muslims, attacked the Pope, it attacked Israel, rabbis, it attacked black people and white people and gay people and straight people. It attacked every kind of human being because what? It was making fun. Its strategy was to make fun of people. And it was seen as that. It was seen as that. It was very loved. These cartoonists were beloved in France. And now, the moment somebody says, yes, I believe in free speech, but I stop listening. No, yes. You know, I believe in free speech, but people should behave themselves. I believe in free speech, but we shouldn't upset anybody. I believe in free speech, but let's not go too far. The point about it is the moment you limit free speech, it's not free speech. The point about it is that it's free. You can dislike Charlie Hebdo, you know, not all their drawings were funny. You can dislike, but the fact that you dislike them has got nothing to do with their right to speak. The fact that you dislike them certainly doesn't in any way excuse their murder.
I urge you strongly to listen to the dangerous speech you're hearing from the other side and recognize exactly how it can impinge upon your ability not only to speak but to think. The fact that they keep using this strangely castrated phrase, the N-word, which is supposed to be inoffensive, but is actually doubly offensive because it restricts you from the ability to hear the full offense of the word nigger. And they're at every time trying to double back and triple around and make you use words and trip over your own mind and not think and not speak what actually might occur to you in their effort to observe reality and contend with it. I think that's a very dangerous predicament. I think that they are presumptuous and wild in their notion that we can do that reasonably. And I think that we are at less risk taking the great risk of freedom.
I did not come to the United States of America 25 years ago to learn how to keep my mouth shut. And I'm going to reject all offers that I change that policy, however simperingly they are put. Okay?
Thousands of years ago, the first man discovered how to make fire. He was probably burned at the stake he had taught his brothers to light, but he left them a gift they had not conceived, and he lifted darkness off the earth. Throughout the centuries, there were men who took first steps down new roads, armed with nothing but their own vision. The great creators, the thinkers, the artists, the scientists, the inventors, stood alone against the men of their time. Every new thought was opposed Every new invention was denounced. But the men of unborrowed vision went ahead. They fought, they suffered, and they paid, but they won. No creator was prompted by a desire to please his brothers. His brothers hated the gift he offered. His truth was his only motive. His work was his only goal. His work, not those who used it. His creation, not the benefits others derive from it. The creation which gave form to his truth. He held his truth above all things and against all men. He went ahead, whether others agreed with him or not, with his integrity as his only banner. He served nothing and no one. He lived for himself. And only by living for himself was he able to achieve the things which are the glory of mankind. Such is the nature of achievement. Man cannot survive except through his mind. He comes on earth unarmed. His brain is his only weapon. But the mind is an attribute of the individual. There is no such thing as a collective brain. The man who thinks must think and act on his own. The reasoning mind cannot work under any form of compulsion. It cannot be subordinated to the needs, opinions, or wishes of others. It is not an object of sacrifice. Look at history. Everything we have, every great achievement has come from the independent work of some independent mind. Every horror and destruction came from attempts to force men into a herd of brainless, soulless robots without personal rights, without personal ambition, without will, hope, or dignity. It is an ancient conflict. It has another name: the individual against the collective. Our country, the noblest country in the history of men, was based on the principle of individualism.